Yeah. One, two, 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Hello and welcome back to today's podcast. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Frederick Dodson, one of my favorite authors and thinkers. Frederick is a writer of 55 plus books, if I have that correctly. He's a prominent success coach and a consciousness researcher. Some of his most popular books are Levels of Energy, Parallel Universes of Self, and Prosperity Consciousness. And Fred, I'm really excited to chat with you today. Thank you for taking the time this morning to come on.
Hello, Jack Moses, and hello, all the people who are watching right now. No matter when, you'll probably still be watching in 50 years from now. Isn't that amazing?
It is. That's why I love podcasts, because I'm going to be able to look back on this at 80 years old and be like, wow, I really had no idea what I was talking about back then, but I was having fun. Yeah. So first question for you is, you've been in this career for such a long time and had a lot of success. What does life look like for you today? And I'm more interested actually in, how does it feel? What is the felt embodiment sense of a day in a life today for you?
Well, it just keeps getting better and better because of what I do and what I taught myself. These days, I do a lot of tennis playing and jogging and swimming and weight training and writing and researching. A lot of researching. A lot of time goes, you'd think that eventually I wouldn't be curious anymore and all my questions are answered, but the more you know, the more you still want to know. About once a week, I voice my intentions and as commands or in prayer. So I don't do that much in regards to the techniques that I teach. I do that about once a week for a few minutes, and that's it. That's enough, What else do I do? That's what I do, but that's not the beingness behind it, because you can do all kinds of stuff, but it's about the state you're in when you do it. I could go jogging in a state of, well, let's get this over with, or I could do it in a state of joy. I could play tennis tense and erratic, or I could do it in a state of flow. I could be hanging out with my wife in the evening, stressed and overwhelmed, or in love. So it's not, I do the same things other people do too. The difference, I think, is the state, just the state.
And I would love to dive deeper into how you unlocked that state, because I know you've developed a handful of techniques over the years, but I'm wondering if there was ever one big awakening moment or some type of psychedelic or plant medicine experience that kind of just shifted your perspective on reality forever, or was it more gradual?
Well, I did psychedelics when I was young, but that's not what shift your states, because as I say in my books, psychedelics is a horizontal shift, not a vertical shift. A horizontal shift is like this way, but what you're looking for is a vertical shift. And you see in all these people who do psychedelics for years, not that much changes in their actual reality, except that they just, I experienced this and this is awesome and that's like entertainment. But what you're really looking for is improvement upwards on levels of consciousness. And I write about that in my book Levels of Energy. You want to increase your level of consciousness, and in order to do that, you need to know what the levels of consciousness are. And it's really helpful for you, for me, I still do it, to see your life as a scale from 1 to 10. I just published a book called Upscaling that invites you to see everything on a 1 to 10 scale. That is, the breakfast I eat is on a 1 to 10 scale. And I usually label things that I experience on a 5. So my breakfast right now is level 5. What would level 6 of that breakfast be? What would level 7 of that breakfast be? And just an awareness of what's the next step, what's one level higher, helps you get there, helps you develop an awareness of where you're going. And that's how I improved, always knowing that I could do even better than this and even better than this. I can write even better than this. I mean, if you look back at my writings in my early 20s versus now, my writing is so much more refined. I like looking at my videos. They're still available on YouTube when I was like a twerp of 20 years old, and they're good. They're valid. They're okay. But in a way, this kid had no idea what he's talking about, but he was smart, so smartness never changes.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. And I love your take on psychedelics moving you more horizontally to see more, but like the integration is the daily practice, because I first realized I wanted to be a writer on my first ever mushroom journey when I was 20 years old. And the big thing that opened up for me was I realized I was an athlete at the time, and I still am, but I've only saw myself as an athlete. And so I thought my potential was limited to be 22 years old. But when I took mushrooms and my sight expanded, I said, I can be a writer for the next 50 years. I can keep improving at this and peak when I'm 70. That sounds way more exciting. And so that kind of set me on this early path. And I think this upscaling method, which I've just been reading that book yesterday, and I did the guided meditation and I sent it to my friends. It's a great book. Everybody out there, go check out Fred's new book. I'll link it below. But in this method, you talk about moving up from 5 to 6 to 7, and just it's written very practically. I'm curious for you, like if you had to talk about your own life in a broader sense right now, what's that next upscaling level you're aiming at right now?
Well, that's not necessarily something I share with people, because I like to, because I don't need other people's thoughts influencing what I'm going to do. So I usually don't share my goals and where I'm going. It's always a surprise. I publish a book and suddenly it's there and people never knew I was working on it. So I'm going to keep that to myself.
That is honestly maybe the most valuable answer you could have given, because it just confirms something that I've been researching about the observer effect in quantum physics, and how when somebody sees your goal, then their thought energy is infused in it. And so I think everybody out there that just heard that is the most valuable answer you could have actually given. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, on kind of the thread of the psychedelic experiences, I'm also curious about mystical encounters. And so in your view, can you define what fits under the bucket of a mystical encounter? And could you possibly share one that you've had?
Yeah. A few months ago, actually, I was on the road traveling to a coaching 8-hour trip. It was winter, 8-hour drive. And I was at a gas station, and this young guy approaches me and says, "You'll want to have a long lunch in the restaurant. There's trouble ahead on the road, and you don't want to be involved in that trouble," or something to that extent. And I thought, okay, I'll take that as a sign. Okay, I'm open-minded. I just took it as a sign. Went into the restaurant, had a long lunch, and it was only about 15 minutes later that ambulances and fire trucks were driving down the road, because there had just been a collision of 5 cars with injuries, possibly even death. So what I saw is that this guy told me that before it happened. Okay, this is like 15 minutes later, the collision happens. He said, you might want to have a long lunch. I mean, how did he even know? He's at the gas station. He hasn't even driven there yet. Maybe he came from the other side. Okay, but to me, that could count as a mystical encounter. It doesn't have to be. There could be a rational explanation, but I've had so many of these encounters that eventually you ask yourself if there's not angels or agents or helpers, helpers around that are actively trying to provide pointers. What do you think?
Mm. That was what was coming to my mind as well. Like, I've read a lot of books and heard a lot of stories around angels just appearing, but in human form, right? You would never think, oh, this guy looks like an archangel or something like this, but it's just somebody there, a little nudge to deflect you off the path so you can keep on this mission you're on in this lifetime. So that's incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes because they're so human, you only recognize what happened much, much later. And then you look back and think, yeah, well, that was a pivotal encounter. That must have been beyond this world. Sometimes you don't even recognize it in the moment it's happening. That's why folks stay awake. Okay, everything that happens to you could have a deeper meaning. That's mystical talk right there. Everything that happens is almost paranoid. You don't want to get paranoid, okay? But everything that happens has a deeper meaning.
Yeah, it's very much how I live my life. And a lot of people in my life are just always like, oh, it's coincidence, oh, you can't explain it rationally. But I think for the majority of people, if they understood the depth at like the synchronicities that I experience, it's like it's incomprehensible to the rational mind. And I would never have believed it a few years ago. So it's a blessing to be able to see reality this way. Now, I'm curious as well if you've had any glimpses into any past lives.
Well, I've had a lot of glimpses of a lot of stuff. Loads of glimpses and even out of body experiences. So it's hard to categorize what they are. I've also had glimpses of other lives, not necessarily past lives on Earth, but just other places altogether. Okay, it's not set in stone that you keep having to come back to Earth. I don't believe that. I certainly hope not. I, higher places, different places, other places, maybe other realms, other planets. I don't know. So yes, they're just very hard to categorize. They come to you between waking and sleeping most often. You just get flashes of things. You're like, I've never been to this place. What is this? In this lifetime, I have never been to this place. How do I know about this? Or I find myself suddenly knowing stuff that I couldn't possibly know from this lifetime. I told my wife the other day that when I was a kid, I used to dream of Melbourne, Australia, never having been there. My parents never took me there. But I had these recurring dreams of being in Melbourne. And when I finally went there for real, I recognized places. This is so weird. Oh yeah, I'm familiar with this place and this place, even though it was the first time I had traveled there. So, here's the weird part. The Melbourne that I remembered wasn't a Melbourne in the distant past where you could say that's a past life. It was modern Melbourne. What I think happened here is that my dream self, that we have a double, we have a dream self that lives an entirely different life than we do.
Mm. And that dream self, is
Is that weird enough for you?
no, we could go weirder. I don't mind. But that dream self, is it in a higher dimensional plane where it's not actually like in physical matter?
Not necessarily. It's I think it's on the astral realm, which is not a higher plane. It's similar in vibration to Earth. So not necessarily, you do have selves that are in higher planes, but the dream self is not. And I think that because the experiences are often kind of dense, sometimes dark, sometimes nightmarish. And then there's higher realm experiences, um, once in a while, but that's with a different self. I think we do have, now that I talk about it with you, we do have different selves and different realms, astral realm, spiritual realm, and so forth.
Mm. I haven't heard that delineation between those realms before. Like, how would you distinguish the astral self versus the spiritual self?
Well, the astral realm is directly adjacent to planet Earth, and most of the spirits that are there are those that didn't ascend, the confused, the emotionally sick, and they're stuck there. It's like a kind of a purgatory. And these people that are stuck in the astral, they're usually recycled back to Earth. This may sound weird, but or they need some kind of healing. I believe there's healing crews, and that's the astral realm. It's like a muck, a red pink colored muck, in my opinion, in my view, in my experience. And then there's the actual spiritual realm that people are supposed to ascend to if they die in a good state, in a light state. The ancients said you got to be light as a feather when you die so that you ascend. So those are distinctions to make. And, you know, um, there's many different levels. People need to know that there's many, just like in the upscaling book or levels of energy, there are many different levels.
Mm.
Just like
And
in life, neighborhoods,
yeah.
a bad neighborhood, middle neighborhood, good neighborhood.
Mm. And that spiritual realm that it is, you could say, our goal to ascend to beyond this lifetime, is that reserved for, say, like an ascended master, like the people we hear about in history, like Jesus Christ, Yogananda, like these big spiritual figures that are quote unquote ascended masters? Or is that is that state attainable for most human beings if they devote themselves to it?
Well, there's so many levels. I believe that anybody can attain a good level. Anybody, really. And then there's, spiritual ascended master level, which is way higher. Okay, so the ancients spoke of 10 heavens, 8 heavens, 9 heavens, cloud nine, seventh heaven. You have all these expressions in old languages. And anybody can attain a level where they ascend in the afterlife. It's not that difficult. I mean, you shall not murder. How hard can it be? You know what I mean? I mean, seriously, how hard can it be?
Interesting. Yes. Now, on these topics of, they're very spiritual topics, mystical topics, maybe we'll bring it back down to earth for some people, because I have a lot of people in my audience that are like very interested in entrepreneurship and business, and I am too. But this stuff is just very fascinating to me. So I want to keep going on this thread. So if somebody were to just go to you and say, "Hey, Fred, like, are you enlightened? What's enlightenment?" Would you answer yes, or how would you define that?
Well, no, absolutely not. There's people who say, "Hey, Fred, you claim to be enlightened, so why?" And I'm like, "Can you show me where I claim to be enlightened?" I mean, like one sentence, anywhere, any post, any book. No, absolutely not. I don't believe in enlightenment. I believe in levels of consciousness with no limit upwards. So if you say, "Now I'm enlightened, now I've made it," you're actually stagnating, because there's always more. And then there's more and more and more and more and more. I've had these experiences every now and then. First cosmic consciousness experience when I was around 14. But before that, I had a lot of out of body travel. And there are these states that could be called enlightenment, but they're not final states. And I've touched upon them. How do you think I wrote all those books? You know, I've touched upon them, but in my day-to-day state, I'm no different than anybody else.
Very interesting. So, in the process of writing these books, you feel as though you're tapping into a cosmic consciousness or a God consciousness?
Well, I'm remembering what I experienced. Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm seeing it from that perspective, from those eyes. And then I write. But
Fascinating.
in order to write and achieve earthly goals, you have to reduce your consciousness back down. So the problem isn't having all these high experiences and traveling around. It's downloading it. I have to be high enough to access it, but low enough to write. Because if I'm too high, I'm not going to be interested in writing or teaching or anything.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's what I remember reading in both your books and Hawkins' books, is like at the level of 700s and those levels, like all goals just disappear. Like you're gonna want to meditate and be in a bliss and ecstasy forever. But you talk about it's important to be able to play at and live at in many of the different levels. And so like maybe bringing it back down to the business world, like you define the business world as being more in like the 300s and 400s. Is that right?
Yeah.
How do you then integrate like level 500 and above consciousness into level 300 and 400 activities, let's say?
Well, you should know that there's no separation between business and spiritual. People always delineate it's either business or spiritual, and all these separations are artificial because if I'm doing business, business is an exchange of energy, exchange of information, exchange of money. That's all exchange of energy, and that's spiritual. Okay. Or if I play tennis, I'm being spiritual because tennis allows me to go beyond the mind and get into the flow. So the first thing is to know that all of these separations are wrong. It's just a matter of being interested enough to narrow your focus. Like in the 700s, as you call it, your attention is pretty wide. And if you want to get down to business, to the 300s, you narrow your attention. Like when I'm writing, it's very narrow attention. It's a matter of being more alert and more focused. To me, people in the 300s seem super alert, over alert. And if you see somebody in the 700s, they appear less alert, even though they're not. They're just, their awareness is more spread. Basically, you like psychedelics. That's what psychedelics do a little, is to widen attention, widen awareness, and you're aware of many things at the same time. And the reason we came to Earth is actually to narrow our focus and have amnesia and not remember all this stuff. So the benefit of not remembering and narrowing your focus is to get stuff done here.
Fascinating. I love this open perspective versus narrow, and it highlights something that I have been feeling intuitively in myself. So over the past 3 years since that first mushroom journey, I've had a number of psychedelic experiences, probably like upwards of 25 to 30, and some very intense ones. But recently, like there's been opportunities to continue on, and I'm getting this massive no response in my body. like I'm just feeling it's time to narrow my focus. I've seen what I've seen. It's time to take action. And so this definitely, this conversation is very synchronistic with that timing. So thank you
Oh,
for that.
yeah, I'd expect it to be. You only attract stuff when you're in the middle of it. So yeah.
Of course. Now, maybe zooming out a little bit more broadly and philosophically, how do you see this AI revolution affecting and impacting humanity?
Well, to me, it's a lot of hype. You know, when the internet revolution started, they had the same hype. It said it would change the world, change everything, bring world peace, increase our intelligence. But that really, it happened a little, you know, things got a little, there was a little more communication, a little more information, but not as much as they hyped. Because even after internet, people are still struggling in consciousness levels. They're still ignorant about a lot of things. And that's because more information doesn't make more knowledge. More information does not make more knowledge. And also, more information doesn't mean people will actually apply it. Moreover, having AI doing everything for you does not necessarily build your skill, your focus, your mind. So, you know, I know authors, they have AI write books for them now, narrate books for them now. And that's well and good. They can do that and they can make money off it, and that's fine. But they themselves become couch vegetables in the process. They don't develop their power. So when I'm standing beside him in a room, and I've stood beside him, the aura couldn't be more different. You got a vegetable, and then you got somebody with presence, with power, with real power.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what people need to watch out for. They need to keep developing their power and not just cede everything to AI and be lazy. Okay, so AI doesn't change the fundamentals. It either emphasizes your good parts or your bad parts, just like drugs basically emphasize your good parts or your bad parts. Get a bad trip or a good trip depending on where you are. These are tools basically, and uh, AI is best when it's your servant. It's an important statement that I like to make, not your master. AI is best when it's your servant. And I get very annoyed when AI tries to be my master and tell me what to do instead of doing what I want. So the way I'm going to use, and the way I already use AI, is to serve me, you know, to automate certain boring processes so that we don't have to do boring stuff anymore. That's what AI is great for. Just like the industrial revolution and the internet revolution, you know, they automated stuff so that we don't have to do this kind of mediocre, repetitive factory work anymore. So that's what's going to happen, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love the frame of make AI your servant and not your master. And I think it's dangerous to those who lack autonomy already and want everything to be told to them and done for them. And I see it in college right now. Like, kids are not thinking for themselves, writing for themselves, and they're getting away with it. They're getting a good grade, but what are the consequences for their own evolution? I think
Well,
that's the conversation that
yeah,
needs to be had more.
yeah. Well, it's not my problem. You know, that's why I shine in comparison to them. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really my problem. If there, I do most of the things myself, and this expertise creates an aura, a presence, a power. You know, and if they don't develop, it's not really my problem. It's their responsibility to develop. And I did it, and that's to my advantage. You know what I mean?
Yes, most
So
definitely.
yeah. Folks, you need to keep developing your power. You need to do it yourself. People, for example, people quit learning coding in the assumption that AI is going to code for them. But what's going to happen if nobody knows how to code anymore? We'll be like back 100 years ago, people knew how to do everything themselves. People knew how to build a TV, build a radio, plant plants. They knew how to knit. And nowadays, they don't know anything. I mean, they can't do anything on their own. And what kind of human does that produce? It produces a docile, sleepy human. So my message is learn to do it yourself, even if AI can do it for you. I usually, before I outsource something to a person or to I usually learn how to do it myself just in case so that I know what's going on. Like I outsource website work to others, but I know every once in a while I do it myself to keep up to date with how to operate a website.
I see. Yes. Okay, I got one more question for you here. Do you believe that, let's say in our lifetimes, humanity can return to the Garden of Eden? And if not now, what type of time scale might that take? And what does that even mean?
Exactly. What does it even mean? You asked the question. You're funny. So I'm not sure that that's what this place is for. Like imagine going to a Marines training camp or something and then asking, oh, when can we return to more comfortable circumstances? And they'll tell you, well, you booked this training camp or you're in this training camp knowing it's not going to be comfortable. When can I return to Eden? So I don't know if that's what this place is for. To me, it's more like a training, a contrast training and challenges. It brings up challenges. It's got a balance of good and bad. I don't know if it's for being Eden. But if people wanted to make it back to Eden, I think they'd have to become much more aware of what's going on in their own neighborhoods, their own communities. Like right now, people are pretty much, they're barely aware of what's going on in their own bodies and minds. Okay, so you start by becoming aware of what's going on in your body, then going on in your mind, then in your neighborhood, then in your community, then in your state, then in your country. And that awareness is just not there. So you can't really expect things to go well because if things are unattended to, they just don't go well. That's just the nature of this realm. It's a pretty dense realm. So that's what would have to happen to return to Eden, a basic awareness. I feel like I see and I feel like people have no clue what's going on in their own communities. Okay, no clue. There's somebody near them that desperately needs attention, but they're stuck to their phones, for example.
Mm.
That's not Eden. However, I think you're here for training, and I think it's a great school for training. If you make everything Eden, you don't have a training camp anymore. I think we're preparing here for higher missions. We're in amnesia. It's like a training program we're locked into, and then after we die, we realize, oh, okay, this was just a training. Now it's time for the real job.
Mm. And what is the real job?
Well, if I told you that, it would distract you from your training.
I hear that.
Part of the training is actually to figure it out.
Mm.
You're put in amnesia. Now see if you can figure it out.
Exactly. It's quite an interesting game we're in. There's a movie called Maze Runner, which I saw when I was like 12 years old, and I didn't understand it at like a metaphysical level. But now when I think back to it, like they put these people in a maze, they all forget why they're there. Once they escape, they realize that the maze was like all an illusion, and then like there is so much more to this reality than was there before. I remember just watching that at like 12 years old, and like I was like, that's deep, but I don't know why yet.
Maze Runner is totally a metaphor. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, a great way to start my Friday morning. So I'm really grateful for you coming on.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any final thoughts or things you want to share with the viewer or listener?
Yes, dear viewer, enjoy yourself. That's it. Enjoy
Amazing.
yourself, because life is over this quickly. Honestly, it's over this quickly. So seize the day. Don't live your life in the assumption that you got loads of time. It could be over any time, and it goes over so quickly. Okay, so do the things you enjoy, and don't just be a working slave, lab rat. Enjoy yourself.
Amazing advice. Thank you.